Aloha and welcome to Ehana Kako. We're here every week on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Kili'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute. We are very much committed to a better Hawaii in the future for our keiki, for our children, and that's why we talk about individual liberty, free markets, and limited accountable government. I'm always excited to meet somebody who believes in these values, and today we have a gentleman who not only knows these values, he promotes them across the country and the world. His name is Robert Graham. He's the chairman of the Arizona Republican Party. Now, as I say those words, Arizona Republican Party, you might think that this may be a partisan-oriented show today, but it's far from that. I think there's a common ground where everyone, regardless of party, understands that we can have a better economy, a better government, a better society, and that's what this man believes. I look forward to chatting with him about some issues that are relevant for everyone in Hawaii. Please welcome to the program with me, Robert Graham. Robert, aloha.
It's great to be here. Aloha.
Well, it's good to see you. Hawaii is becoming a familiar place to you.
It is. I love it. And it's been a great time so far. Got in here Friday night and we've been
That's great.
Busy.
And it's not your first time. What do you like about the Hawaiian Islands?
Well, the people, that's the first part,
All
of
right.
course. You know, when you come here, people are incredibly hospitable and they make you feel like part of the family. They want to share with all the rich culture and traditions of the islands, and that's excellent. When you come from the desert, it's much different than
Sure.
Hawaii, and so having this experience has been
Arizona,
fantastic.
how about that? Well, you know, you've got a lot of great things going on in Arizona and some innovations in your government. I'm going to cut to the chase now because we could talk about the beautiful environment here in Hawaii, but I'd love to know what you think, being an international businessman, somebody who's been involved in finance and technology, and somebody who's involved at politics at a national level. What do you think when you think of Hawaii as a business climate coming into it?
Right. You know, one of the things that I suffer from is being an entrepreneur. You see the potential in everything. And so when you come to a place like Hawaii and, you know, you look at the strategic positioning, you see the educated population, the density of the population, and the opportunities within this region, it's remarkable in a number of different ways. So as a business entrepreneur, you look at people, you look for innovation, you look for opportunities, and you look for people with creativity, and you have it all here. But what happens is if you look at the economy and what's been happening within the Hawaiian economy, and you see it pulling back, you see debt increasing, you see just driving down the streets, you see the problem with the homeless and such. I mean, this becomes a very real and relevant issue for people, but there's got to be a different
Sure.
solution or path to solutions.
You've been involved in investments and finance,
That's right.
and you've certainly learned about what happened to our 30-meter telescope project. Before that, our super ferry project. How do investors look at Hawaii as a destination for their capital for anything other than high-end real estate?
When you look at this foreign direct investment, what you've got to think about is people are looking for an investment to have a return on investment, right? They're looking for sustainability. They're looking for a great partner in whatever country they come into or whatever state they come into. And so if they come in and they make a deal and they make a big investment within a state, somebody else does, and then the government folds up shop because of protest or some other dynamic that's happened quickly, which impacts negatively that foreign direct investment, all the rest of us that are watching this, the number one thing we try to avoid is risk. And when that's a very real risk when the government doesn't support the innovation and creativity or the jobs that are trying to come into an area. Even if it's the perfect environment for foreign direct investment, they will not come if the political risk is too high. And in this case, when you have these agreements that aren't being upheld or people are backing away too quickly because of the winds of protesters, even if it's a minority group, that makes it worse when you have a very small population that's able to tip over a government on a promise that they made with foreign direct investment. So it's not a good thing for an economy.
Do you think that has something to do with the balance between the parties here in Hawaii? It's no secret that we're primarily one-party oriented, and whether that would be totally Republican or totally Democrat in control, does that create a problem in terms of building the economy?
It does in a sense, because when you have a balanced government, whether it's Republican majority, Democrat majority, but you have a little closer to a two-party or multi-party system, that helps to mitigate some of the risk because it slows things down in government. You don't have one party pushing a specific agenda and they try to get everybody on board quickly and make it happen. It hasn't worked well in the federal government and doesn't work well in local governments when that happens. So the people, when you see a big dense population that votes Democratic or tend to have a Democratic leadership,
Right.
they're either afraid of government and they vote one party line, or they just feel apathetic and start to pull back. And what they don't realize, or what they should realize, what I would encourage voters to do, is engage in this, balance it out. Because when you balance it out, you have Democrats and Republicans that each have ideas. And the people need to be able to filter through those policies to see if they really are going to help their standard of living. I mean, ultimately it comes down to quality of life. people want to improve their quality of life. They want to have better opportunity with jobs. And if the environment isn't conducive for that, they're not coming here. They're not going to come here, and the people are going to, they're actually going to be deprived of some golden opportunities because the environment is repressive, and that's happening here. When I look at it strictly as a nonpartisan perspective, as a foreign direct investment, there are policies within the state that are prohibitive. They make you not want to come into the state when you start talking about taxes, other fiscal policy, the environmental guidelines, the labor unions and the impact that they have on the cost of doing business. These are all expenses that take away from the bottom line and hurt the growth of business. So you want to innovate and be creative, you need resources to do it.
There are clearly issues where we are not hitting the mark.
Right.
What's the solution? Is the solution a political solution, a solution a policy solution? How would political candidates who want to be successful and do good for the public go about changing Hawaii?
Yeah, I think it is always a political solution because politics really comes down to any special interest. If it's a single mom with 3 kids, she has interest. If it's a corporation that wants to potentially develop here, they have interest, right? So it's getting back to this political dynamic that's going to lead to policy shifts. So when you look at kind of the brass tacks you're trying to get into, you have to listen to the people, but the people have to start understanding what their options are. And right now, I think that in many states, people are not engaged in the voting process or the political process at any level. So again, from an economic development standpoint, you look and say, this is what we would like. So you start to set the vision and then start looking at other states that have similar demographics. Maybe they're blue or they're red politically, or maybe it's a good mix, but they've had some great economic success. There are 8 or 9 different indicators that would lead a state to having some interesting momentum or shift momentum into a positive economic growth. And it's already been proven. It's been tested in other states.
Well, you sound like a think tank guy now when you talk about these indicators because, you know, at the Grassroots Institute, one of the things we want to contribute, whether we're communicating with legislators or with the general public, is the fact that there are other states who have gone through what we're going through, who've avoided it or who've overcome it or who've done better or who are doing worse.
Right.
And we can look at indicators. We can look at best practices and so forth. What would be one of those indicators that we would look at to measure how well a state is doing and see how Hawaii is in comparison?
Yeah, so I think one policy dynamic that's really powerful is right-to-work legislation.
Okay,
so
right to work. Let me just stop you there for a moment here because we don't hear that phrase, right to work, very much here in Hawaii, although it's well known across the nation. What exactly does right to work refer to?
Right to work means that you, as an employee of an organization, whether it's unionized or not, has the ability to choose whether they want to be a member of the union or not. That's it, and they can't be fired. See, in some states, if it's a non-right-to-work state, let's say it's GM and you're a member of that company, and if you do not pay your union dues, they can fire you, even if you're the top-performing person in there. So right to work makes it so it levels the playing field for the employee and gives them options to join or not join.
I love the way you put that because it's not about whether we have unions or not. It's not about whether unions are good or bad. It's about individuals, and you use the word choose, the right to actually choose.
Well, think about this. If you were to go sign up for a gym membership out there, you do it because you find that one gym or that one athletic place is the best suited and offers you the most value to become a member. Right? You go there because you find the value in it. You could choose anybody else, but you chose that. Now, if a person doesn't find value in their union membership, why should they have to or be forced to do it? Not to even to the point where they are forced, but they'll lose their job if they don't participate in the union dues. So again, it would actually help the unions add more value to their customer or their membership if they were forced to really bring them value.
Now, union participation here in Hawaii is a very big thing.
It's huge.
And the power of the unions is very great. And there's a noble heritage to the unions in Hawaii, having arisen at a time when workers didn't have protections, didn't have benefits, where the environment was very different and federal and state laws weren't developed to the level they are. But as you know, of course, this has changed. That's all obsolete. So the question I want to put to you is if Hawaii loosened up a bit on the requirement to participate in unions to be in certain industries, if we had more of a right to work where people could choose, how would that help the Hawaii economy?
See, what happens is that the labor, the capital that comes in, or the organizations that come in, they feel like they have some breathing room a little bit because they're going to allow the free markets to work. This doesn't mean taking advantage of people. Unions have been so effective. They've created about 180 labor laws that cover 122 million employees. You've got the protection. You just need to know what your protection is. So you come in, and what it does is it allows them to breathe a little bit, because many times unions say that their only benefits they're going to give you are higher wages and better benefits. Well, that equals to more expenses for business. Now, everybody believes that they should have great benefits, and you have to create value for the employee to keep them there. But when you artificially increase, because it's the only benefit that you're offering your membership, they have to keep fighting that fight, and it puts the organization into a really compromising spot, where sometimes if it's a union-heavy, non-right-to-work state like Hawaii, they feel like they have to sign these dealers or they may lose some of their employees. What it does is it levels the playing field. It gives the voice not just from the people and the workers, but it gives the voice, so it's a balance between the two organizations. Now, again, we have all these laws that cover the rights of employees, and it's a matter of making sure that those are visible. Corporations should have a duty to educate their employees of what those rights are.
That's right.
And then the unions will become somewhat obsolete. They've done such a good job with public schools and getting these labor laws in place. They've kind of worked themselves out of a job, in a sense, because they've already created the value that covers workers. So,
this conversation that we're having is not all that common in Hawaii, because we have had a certain mode for decades, and very few of us are able really to think outside of that. But you mentioned national indicators. We are ranked, as you would know, near the bottom, amongst the bottom 3 states in terms of the quality of our rights to work. And I think that very few people here even understand that the ability to choose where you work, what industry you go into, is actually a right.
It is. So Texas, for instance. Texas, they had right-to-work laws that were passed many, many years ago, back in I think the early 40s or late 40s, but they didn't have any protection under the law. It was just the law that was in place. Later in the 90s, they passed it. Well, when they passed this law, right to work, they brought in 1,000, not 1, 2, but 1,000 different manufacturing plants came into the community. Multiple doctor communities, production. More cars are produced in Texas than in Michigan now.
And so there was an economic boon to increasing the right to work.
Yeah, when the market turned down in our nation, Texas was fine. They kept very low unemployment, and they kept moving things forward.
We need this in Hawaii. Now, we've got a couple minutes before we go to the break. Is there another indicator that Hawaii should take a look at and consider rising in our rank on?
Look, the right to work legislation, what it does is it sets the good foundation.
Sure.
Once you have that, then you're going to start to see what I call business migration to the community, because the foreign direct investment is going to say, look, there's one element for us to move to. So the next one goes into taxes. When businesses move into a community, people follow. When people follow, they start to buy goods and services. Housing does better. These are all indicators that will lead to a real boom within it. So when we start talking about the next thing is fiscal policy. It's looking at corporate fiscal policy as well as personal fiscal policy.
That's why states like New York, when they're trying to increase their attractiveness to business, drop their personal income, their corporate income taxes.
Yeah, they have their tax-free zone. So people say, oh, they're giving corporate welfare. Well, here's the thing. If a corporation moves there, they're bringing jobs, and those people are earning incomes, and the income taxes and then their consumption with all the small business and stuff helps everybody.
Well, one of the concerns here in Hawaii is that should we reduce the tax rate, even for corporations, we would reduce the revenues that government gets. We would reduce the services then that are provided for the people. But is that really true?
No, actually, I'm glad you brought that up. If you look at a little state like Delaware, who cut their corporate taxes in half years ago, I think it was in the 90s, I'm not positive on the date, but they actually, they almost doubled their total revenue in 18 months. Okay, so it's actually quite the opposite, because people start to feel safe in that area, they move in there and they migrate. On the opposite, if you raise taxes, people migrate away from the taxes. Our LAFR has a great thing called the LAFR curve, and it talks about prohibitive tax rates, and there's a certain bend point, we don't know when it is, where people will back away. But in the state of Arizona, our former governor raised sales tax by 18%. I was up in Sedona, which is kind of an artsy community, and they actually had met somebody in the parking lot that was ordering art from the studio right there where they were, in the parking lot, because he was avoiding the sales tax entirely because it was on the phone transaction.
There you go. It conforms behavior. We're going to come back after the short break, and one of the things I want to ask you about is what a second party could bring to the mix? Right now, we've got a single party, and some of the ideas that we talk about, right to work, reducing corporate income taxes, and so forth, are not the official party line. So what role can a second party play in order to bring new ideas into the mix? My guest today is Robert Graham. He's the chairman of the Arizona Republican Party, and we're having a fascinating discussion on what we can learn from a different point of view to apply to our government and our economy. Don't go away. This is Keli'i Akina on Think Tech Hawaii's Ehana Kako. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Chris Leatham here with Think Tech Hawaii, and I invite you to watch my show, The Economy and You, each Wednesday at 3 o'clock here in Hawaii on OC 16. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hittel, and I host a show, Climate Change Beyond Outrage. In it, we go beyond outrage to look at solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. Join me every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Hawaii Standard Time. See you then.
Aloha, my name is Richard Emery, host of Condo Insider. More than a third of Hawaii's population live in some form of association, and our show is all about educating board members and owners about their responsibilities and obligations and providing solutions for a great association. You can watch me live on Thursdays, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. each week. Aloha.
Well, welcome back to our second segment of Ehana Kako. My guest, Robert Graham, who is the chairman of the Arizona Republican Party, is still here, and we're going to learn a lot more from him. But first, let me say thanks to Think Tech Hawaii. What a great organization led by Jay Fidel and a terrific team of employees and staff and volunteers. They produce about 30 to 35 hours of original content every week, broadcast live from downtown Honolulu on the internet and then rebroadcast in various formats. You can get all of the content on great issues at thinktechhawaii.com. Now, back to my guest. We are dealing with thinking differently here in the state of Hawaii. Thinking differently because when there is competition between political parties, ideas rise to the top and people can choose the best of those ideas as they're seen competitively. Unfortunately, if there's only one dominant party, whether it's Republican or Democrat, the people lose out. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the benefits of party competition. Robert, earlier you indicated that there are indices, measurements that could be looked at across the nation that indicate whether or not a state is performing well financially and will do well in the future. One of those is whether the people have the right to work. Another one is whether the tax structure is complementary to bolstering business or whether it's stifling business. Now, when we look at that, do you think that having competition between political parties is a key factor in being able to produce these better results that you've been discussing?
Absolutely. You know, if you think about these candidates, when they go out and campaign, what do they tell you? They want to work for you. And then if they have a new set of fresh ideas, you've got to look back and you got to look inward where we are right now today. If the people of Hawaii could sit up and say, yeah, we're doing great. You know, we've got great economic growth. We have no issues with debt here. Leadership is there. There's no other dynamics. Our homeless population and our services and our social dynamics are all working out just perfectly. Then I would say, hey, you're probably in pretty good shape. But that's not what I'm hearing since I've been here. So when you have another party that introduces their principles and values, even if they're counter to the current party in power, that's a healthy debate to have, because what it does is it forces one party to defend their ideas and the other one to bring and defend and to create or show the value of their ideas. And who wins? The people win, because then people have to actually execute on their ideas and have it. Now, again, I'm a Republican. There's no shyness about that, and largely because I'm a fiscal conservative. Because I watch these states around our country that model great labor policy, great tax policy, great tort reform, and and all these EPA environmental dynamics that are supporting a fantastic state, but they're having enormous success, and it goes back to the people. The people's quality of life. Are they able to educate? Do they have the safety? Do they have the opportunities everybody's trying to manufacture? And so when you have two parties kind of working toward it, our country and our state does better.
Now, not only would there be the advantage of competition, but there'd be the advantage of bringing a different frame of reference.
That's right.
As a Republican, what does Republican thinking, if there is anything like that, if there is a set of Republican values, what does it have to do with putting ideas out into the marketplace. Well, what are some distinctives of a Republican way of looking at government and the economy?
So this is maybe offensive to some, and given the fact that we have a large Democrat contingency here in Hawaii, but I would say that Republicans value accomplishment. And what I mean by that is we talk and celebrate something called individualism. So if you have an idea, why it's not a bad idea until you've filtered it, you've taken feasibility, you start to work through it, and you try to accomplish it. So you try to foster an environment, nurture an environment where people's creativity and innovation can lead to great things, whether it's innovation in energy, whether it's energy or innovation in clean water, or you name it. These are all things that can work themselves into government in an effective way. But so we believe that individualism and the value of accomplishment are critically important.
Now, sometimes individualism and the kind of competition you talk about are characterized as the Gordon Gekko of Wall Street philosophy, dog eat dog, social Darwinism, and that what Republicans or fiscal conservatives are talking about is a cruel world in which the needs of the homeless, the needs of the less advantaged are overrun by the free market. How do you respond to that
Yeah, I'm
characterization?
glad you said that. You know, one of the things that's great, when you have economic development in a state or a country that's doing really well, you see this growth, guess what happens? They have more revenue for the social services. We have a problem with mental health in our state of Arizona. When our economy is doing great, you see less people on the street. You see less people that need therapy and medication, disrupting stores and businesses around the city. They're actually working in a very functional way. So it's quite the opposite. When you have free markets that blossom, it brings revenue and opportunity to every part of it, whether it's a church program or it's the mental health or it's the homeless. So it's quite opposite. The solution is through economic growth, you can solve a lot of these social issues.
So you're talking about basic economic principle here, that when the economy thrives, when businesses are released and free to compete and to prosper, there's more wealth overall and there's more revenue that the government gets in the end.
That's right.
But how do we address the concern that in order to take care of immediate needs, we need to tax people more? That if we have homeless, if we have those who have need of social services, if we need prisons and so forth, we can't wait for some shift in the economy.
No, that's right.
We've got to go out there and take that money. Here, every single legislative session, there are multiple proposals for increasing our GE tax. It's a combined GE and sales tax in Hawaii, and our government gets about 50% of all of its general fund in the state from that. Whether it's improving our schools or dealing with homelessness or sponsoring a fixed rail system, we're always trying to increase the GE tax. What do you say to those who argue that's necessary for the needs of the people, for the social services and benefits that we absolutely need?
What I would say to the people is that we all know we need revenue of some kind in order to maintain these programs and such. But when you don't see growth in economic development, you don't see any sustainable foreign direct investment coming and consistent, then what that means is that the people of Hawaii will keep getting taxed more and more and more and more. So again, when you bring innovation in, it's something new. You get new consumers, you get new people, you get new products and services that are sold and moved from Hawaii, and that adds to new revenue, and it doesn't tax the people that are working so hard, the hardworking taxpayers, just to hang on to every penny. They roll their eyes when they hear another tax increase because they know it's going to come from them and their quality of life is going to be interrupted. So when you come in with this innovation and free market mentality, what you're doing is bringing new dollars into the economy that help to bring new revenue to the state. So without increasing it, so the transition could be, hey, hang tight. The other thing is that we have to have fiscal discipline within. If you see that in the ministry, if you see a body of a population actually shrinking, and you see corporate people moving and stuff, and there's no new innovation, of course, they want to keep the same infrastructure. They're going to have to pay for it, and that's going to be we the people that pay for it. So what you try to do, again, it's back to the accountability of our leaders. If they're using this same strategy over and over again, and they're having the exact same results, which is not growing the economy, then something's got to shift.
Right.
And that's where the people have to start looking at other ideas to see if they will catapult Hawaii into that next opportunity, which I believe is real. And it's right here. You're positioned fantastic globally. In the Asia Pacific too, it's a target for opportunity. But right now it's just been kind of stagnant in its growth.
Right. So you've been talking about the need for individualism. You've been talking about the need for robust economic growth and the need to stop taxing the people. What other distinctives are there in Republican thought?
I think it's back to, you know, we talk about things, you hear things like limited government, lower taxation, this value of accomplishment and individualism. Limited government's one of those things where a lot of people go, yeah, okay, wait, that sounds like, what it is getting government off your back. In Chicago, there was a young boy that's third grade that chewed a Pop-Tart in the shape of a gun and pointed it at a classmate, and he got expelled from the school. This is a third grade boy. What little boy doesn't want to point his fingers and act like a gun? That is not limited government, that's government overreach. Or if you look at other businesses that have to deal with the EPA, and the EPA systematically shuts them down because they filed papers incorrectly, did everything else right, but they have too much power in the agency. So what it does is it pushes on these industries so hard that they cannot take a breath toward profitability because they have so much compliance to do.
So you're saying that a Republican position would say, let's limit the growth of government, let's not go after larger government. But as you were talking about earlier, if we're looking to government to provide all of these social services through taxation, we're going to be growing government. Robert, I think we're hit with a double whammy here in Hawaii. We have the growth of the federal government in Hawaii through federal regulations and through our own having to give the federal government what they want because we seek them as a funding source for our schools, for our highways, for everything. But at the same time, we've seen growth of the state government. And so now government employment is a major industry here in the state of Hawaii. Government institutions are a huge part of Hawaii. How do we go about challenging this trend when it's so entrenched?
I'm so glad you asked that question because I think that goes back to, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the reality is when you have sound economic growth, you give people choices. See, when you have revenues coming in because your environment cultivates a great, vibrant economy, then guess what? When the federal government comes and says, hey, we'll give you a grant, but in order for you to take this grant or this funding, you've got to sign the dotted line and do everything we tell you to do. In Arizona, we call that maintenance of efforts. And it's where you're mandated, it's kind of a cooperative federalism, and our states, your state, is giving up their sovereignty to the federal government to basically run Hawaii at this particular point. When you have great economic development and you have revenue as a factor to that, you get to take back not only your government, your state government, and start to really retain your state sovereignty, which I know is critically important to the people here in Hawaii, but you also start to take back your schools. You get to take back the social programs you care about. All these different things come back into shape where you now have control, and you should as a people. You are culturally different than other states in our country. And everybody should recognize that you have different needs and issues in Hawaii than Arizona does. And so you should be the people that really direct your future.
Very good. We're going to come back after a quick break, but to advise my audience, once again, Robert Graham, chairman of the Arizona Republican Party, is here with us. And when he returns with me, we're going to conclude by talking about the national scene. You obviously out there are watching a very vigorous presidential campaign in both parties, and politics at the presidential level is very much coming to Hawaii. In addition to that, I'll ask Robert what his observations are here of the Republican Party and any recommendations he may have. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this short break.
You're watching Think Tech Hawaii, 25 talk shows by 25 dedicated hosts every week, helping us to explore and understand the issues and events in and affecting our state. Great content for Hawaii from Think Tech.
I'm Jay Fidel, and I'm the host of Research in Manoa, Mondays from 12 to 1 on thinktechhawaii.com. Take a look at us and learn about geophysics, learn about planetology, learn about the ocean and earth sciences at UH Manoa. You'll really enjoy it. So come around, we'll see you then.
Aloha, this is Maria Mera, and I'm here to invite you to my bilingual show, Viva Hawaii on Think Tech Hawaii, every other Monday at 3 p.m. We're here to inform, motivate, and entertain you. Join us. Hola, soy María Mera y estoy aquí para invitaros a mi show bilingüe Viva Hawaii en Think Tech Hawaii cada 2 lunes a las 3 de la tarde. Estamos aquí para informaros, motivaros y entreteneros. Apuntaros.
Welcome back to Ehana Kako. This is our final segment, and if you've watched us before, you know Ehana Kako sounds like an ancient Hawaiian saying, e pule kako. Where people have gathered, they've said, e pule kako. Let's pray together in an inclusive way. Well, at the Grassroots Institute, we like to also say, e hana kako. Let's work together. Let's work together for a better economy, a better government, a better society. Think of the terrible alternative of not working together. Now, of course, we all have our different flavors, we have our different approaches, our different ideas. That's what part of being American is all about. Yet at some point, we have to work together around the issues, and that's what we'd like to do at the Grassroots Institute. Today, the gentleman I'm with believes in that very much. Robert Graham is leading many people, not only in Arizona, but outside of his state, in understanding a principle, issues-oriented approach to governing and to doing politics, and we're going to continue with that. Okay, Robert, give us a little insight into your national thinking. We have kind of been brought into the presidential race in a very big way here in the state of Hawaii, even though we all lament the fact that the decisions are made before our polls are closed.
We're the same way.
But no one would have believed a year ago that Bernie Sanders would have taken the Democrat caucuses here in the state, and very few people would have even suspected that Trump would do the same here amongst Republicans. What's going on nationally, and how does that affect what's going on in Hawaii?
Well, you know, so the narrative you've been hearing in the media the last couple of years is that the economy's great, everything's great, things are moving in the right direction, and the people have a better quality of life. What you're seeing now in the polls and the way that they're migrating or attracted to different candidates, you're seeing that's not the case. So here you've got two polarizing forces. You've got Bernie Sanders on one side, and you've got Donald Trump on one side. The one thing that I hear about each one of these individuals, everywhere I go, whether it's a Democrat supporter of Bernie or a Republican supporter of Donald Trump, is that they believe them. They believe in what they're saying. And if you really listen to what they're saying, and very different, polarizing approaches to solving the problems of America, is that they come across as sincerely interested in having the best outcome for the people. So nationally, this whole national dynamic around the discourse that's happening around the presidential race is remarkable, to say the least. Each of these candidates have been disruptive. So again, Donald Trump, nobody really thought that he would make it this far. Now he is the nominee. Bernie Sanders is still closing in. You can't count Bernie out because many of the superdelegates are unbound until their convention. So things could happen, but right now, he's an attractive candidate to kind of that social progressive movement that's happening within the country.
Now, why, from your observation, you've been here a couple of times, you've talked with a lot of political people, why do you think Donald Trump appeals to so many Republicans and so many crossover Democrats here in the state?
I think it's because that he brings a fresh set of ideas. He hasn't been part of that established, low-scoring Congress or Senate back in D.C. Comes in with some ideas, and some of them people say are bombastic and a little bit radical, but his entire campaign has been disruptive. It's been non-traditional, non-typical. And so people look at that and they start thinking. Then they look at the traits of CEOs. The traits of good CEOs are people that listen to their team. They adopt or they embrace innovation and ideas, which lead to great outcomes. And regardless of what people will say about his past business successes or failures, lots of business people have successes and failures, but if you look at the chart, so to say, he's on the upward trend and he's been there for some time. And so they look at that and they want that kind of success for America. So when he says make America great again, a lot of people say, well, America is great, and he agrees with that. But I think now when he says make America great again, he's seeing all the endless potential in our country. And he wants to make sure from Hawaii, American Samoa, all the other states and territories that we have an environment to really motivate and realize our potential. And I think that's it. I think honestly, I have people that tell me they're Democrat Muslims that are voting for him even after he said what he said because they believe that he'll protect them as well.
You know, it's often said that Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump represent the non-establishment, although Bernie Sanders has certainly been in the Congress for many, many years. Well, what is this appeal for the non-establishment candidates? What are people looking for when they are shunning those who are more closely aligned to Washington, D.C.?
People want people to represent them and their needs. And I think they're hearing that with both of these candidates. Not as much with Hillary. She's been a part of that fixture, and she's coming across pretty abrasive and brash, and people don't warm up to her very much at all. But with Bernie and Donald Trump, they believe that they are going to come and fight for the people. Look at what we've had in history. Look at, again, here in your state. People govern based upon what the public sentiment is at that time. They tell people, hey, I can't govern unless I get reelected, so I can't make that principled stand until after, and then they never do it because they're afraid of not getting reelected or having the donations to flow. When you hear Donald Trump saying what he's saying, he's unapologetic for what he says. If you see what Bernie Sanders is saying, he's unapologetic for what they say. They want that fresh honesty coming to the people now because we've been crying for it. That's what we thought. Hey, it's a republic, right? We have these representative republic that we talk about. Well, please represent our needs. But right now, to this date, in many, many states, we've had leadership that they're more interested in maintaining their job than really representing their constituency and the people that they really, really represent.
Well, as we talk a little bit more about Hawaii, I'm trying to put myself into the thinking of many of us here who care about values such as our individual liberties, to choose our religion, to choose our culture, to choose the way we want to live, our lifestyles, and so forth. Those are very high values. Diversity is extremely important in the aloha state in which we embrace all people and all lifestyles. It's often thought that Republicans, however, have a single cookie-cutter mindset about social issues, and that if you become a Republican, you have to adopt a very tight, conservative way of looking at society. How do you respond to that if you're asked about that?
I would say that there's absolutely no cookie cutter. There are people on both sides of the aisle that would be like purists for their party and their party platform. But being a chairman and working with millions of Republicans in my state and millions of Republicans across the country, I've recognized quickly that not everybody's on the same page. You have fiscal and social conservatives, which I am, and you have some that are fiscally conservative or they're socially conservatives, more important. And then you have all the in-betweens and people that are more moderate, more candidate-driven or what have you. And that's the great texture of any party, is that you have some differences within the party. But and I think that the same thing happens within the Democrat Party as well. You have people that are more left and progressive, and there are people that are more conservative, leaning into the center. And but that's the beauty of this party system. What happens though, when you're like back to your situation here, when you have a single party dominance for so long, they become entitled in so many different ways. And the one thing that you can do as a people is you can challenge that entitlement by shaking it up a little bit here and there. And when you do that, you'll start to see more honesty, more work for the people. And so whether it was an all Republican Party or all Democrat Party, I'd probably say the same thing, because really what has to happen is the people have to be brought to the surface again. That's why voting is so important in this next cycle. Every year people say this is the most important election of history. Every one of our elections are the most important in history, because they're going to have an impact and they're going to leave a footprint for the future. And we have to make sure that we can manage that footprint in a responsible way.
Well, the Republican Party here in Hawaii is fairly small, extremely small compared to the Democratic Party. And so there's not a lot of attention to it in the media on an analytical level. Once a year there's a convention or there are the party candidates, and the media does come in and show some activity. But you've had the opportunity to have an intimate look into the Hawaii Republican Party. You've been meeting with candidates, you've been meeting with party leaders, you were speaking at the convention, and you've spoken at other functions. If you are in the role of consultant to this second party that is trying to become competitive and a challenge to the dominant party, what are some of the things that you might say to Republicans? And what are some of the observations you have?
So for Republicans or people that espouse these values, you can't sit back and be passive. You have to be an active participant if you want change. If you're not happy, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or Libertarian, if you're not happy with the status quo, you need to engage in a meaningful way, and parties are a natural place to do that. The one thing I'm actually happy to report is that when you have a party that is well-funded, has great technology, has strong volunteers, and that's when you start to see change to occur in communities. Well, what's happening within the Republican Party in Hawaii is small, but it's one of these things where they're having very targeted opportunities this year. They have technology improvements every single day since we've been here. Even the last couple of days, they've had improvements. They have active and willing and enthusiastic volunteers that are starting to engage, and that's what you see, and that's the catalyst to anything. So again, we want people to feel comfortable in their environment. A lot of small business owners, a lot of people that are socially conservative, whether they're in the evangelical community or other religious communities, do migrate their way. And again, you may be that person that's not so religious, but you're really a person that is really interested in economic development, what have you might find that there's a different path that you're comfortable with. So it's good to explore these, and hopefully we'll see more growth. And actually, we've seen it just in the last couple of weeks. We've seen growth in the Hawaiian and Republican Party, and I'll tell you that Donald Trump is actually helping in the growth of the Republican Party in every single state in the country.
In what way is Trump helping the Hawaii
In Ohio as an example, I'll just tell you this,
All
and then
right.
I'll come back here. In Ohio, for instance, they've registered 1 million new Republican voters in Hawaii. In Arizona, I bet we're close to 200,000. In Hawaii, I don't know exactly what the number is, but at the meeting at the state convention, I asked for all the new people engaged in that convention. First time I've ever participated to stand up. 1/3 of the participants in that convention stood up. And if I went and polled them, I would tell you that most of them would tell you that they did it because they're a supporter of Donald Trump. So now you've got this underbelly of America and Hawaii that has been sitting passively watching, that are now engaging. And I think that's a good thing for every Hawaiian, regardless of party affiliation, because the mission should be improving quality of life.
One of the challenges that a second party has in Hawaii for its candidates is not merely communicating on the issues, but telling people why they would need to switch parties, at least for one vote, why they might need to become Republican, or at least why they should stop a family tradition of voting Democrat. If you're advising candidates who are running under the Republican banner, what might you say to help them answer the question when someone asks, why should I vote Republican?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, if you look at the Founding Fathers and you look at the Constitution of the United States, it did not have a party definition inside the Constitution. So it has to go back to we the people. So what we encourage our candidates to do is be great listeners. So when they're in these communities and they're knocking doors, which they are knocking doors, asking questions, what are the needs? What do you need? Trying to understand better what the community has. And then they can align their solutions, their Republican solutions, to help solve these problems of these people. And in many cases, the communities have not heard these solutions because the Republicans have been the minority party. And that's where we get excited, because we're seeing this wave starting to happen. So any candidate, I would say, you need to listen to the people, whether you're Republican or Democrat, but our Republican candidates are doing that. And now they're engaging people in what we call meaningful discussion, and that candidate or that elected now becomes relevant in that person's life, especially if they actually do what they promised they're going to do. And that's the other thing. We tell our candidates, if you get elected, you need to fulfill your promises. Regardless of the political breeze or wind that's blowing through, you need to do it, because that's where you're going to get the trust and the loyalty of the constituents in your district, is if you do what you say you're going to do.
You know, as I look at the docket of candidates running in races, the Democratic Party has the incumbency in virtually every office except for a handful here in the state. And yet there are Republican challengers in a minority of offices. Certainly we don't have prominent figures yet announced for some of the major federal offices. What would you say is necessary in order to field strong Republican candidates for these offices?
When the Republican Party of Hawaii becomes stronger and that body becomes more relevant to success, then it gives people that are capable, possibly willing, definitely qualified candidates, gives them confidence and protection. So when they run, they know that they won't be doing it all by themselves. And so that's a big thing. So when the grassroots organizes in a way where they support candidates, great things happen, because then that community is engaged in helping that person. But we see that when the health of a party, Republican Party in Hawaii, starts to gain momentum, you're going to get better quality candidates coming. We have good quality candidates today, but what happens is more of them in other districts will start to show up in other places, whether it's city council, legislative races, Congress, school boards. You'll start to see this manifest itself in every one of these populations, and that's where the success starts to happen. So as the Hawaiian Republican Party starts gaining more and more momentum, which they are, and I'm a witness to that today and this week, then the confidence starts to increase from the base of people, and that's where more talent will come.
Well, the disadvantage for the Republican Party in Hawaii is they don't have, and I'm going to use the word non-pejoratively, they don't have the kind of machine that the Democratic Party does to continue to field candidates, to prepare the candidates and so forth, and to provide the kind of campaign support that they get. What comes first then? This is the chicken and the egg question. The party or the leader? Does the leader make the party, or does the party produce leaders?
The party is the brand that people are familiar with. So when you bring somebody new to the scene, they have a name. They don't carry that label with them that's already been there. So if you have a leader that comes within the party and can excite a vision and a future, then that's where the great things happen, because the party carries the brand. So many times people push away from the brand, and they shouldn't do that. If you want to think about the greatest leaders in our country, regardless of who they are, football players, government leaders, military leaders, why do you like them? Because they lean into the fight. They're there and they're present. And so when people lean in and they start to lead, that's where great things happen. So when the party with the brand already starts to lean in, then that's where people get excited. And so I think it really starts with the party and with leadership within the party.
Well, that's interesting you mentioned about pushing away from the brand, because I have heard from some candidates over the last several years, I'm not going to confine it to this year, that they're concerned about the fact that the brand is seen as toxic.
Right.
So that they need to get in with as little branding as possible as Republicans in order to get elected, and then make their mark. What are your thoughts about that kind of approach? How might you
I think
respond?
that I think there's people that are mistaking individuals for the party. So there's people within any party. I mean, you saw what happened in Nevada in the Democratic State Convention. They had a riot. They were pulling people off the stage by their hair. They pushed the convention into the street. I mean, that's pretty angry. That did not happen in here in Hawaii. They had good open discourse. Some of it was heated, and some opinions were dismissed, okay? But the reality is that people had a voice and they moved forward. Now, when the party becomes more focused on work, knocking doors, introducing themselves to their neighbors, introducing them to these great policies that we believe are the best principles and values to govern, then people have options and choices. The stigma, some people have never met a Republican. If I ask many Democrats in your state, I've done this, why are you a Democrat? They can't give me a principled answer. They just say, hey, my family,
Well,
tradition.
Maybe we should have a take a Republican to work day.
Yeah, maybe that's it. So, but I can tell you that great things
good.
can happen when people engage, and I think it's
Great.
happening.
Well, Robert, thank you very much for
You're
being
welcome.
on our program today. I wish you the best in your
Thank you,
own
too.
organization, and thanks for giving us some insight today.
Hey, my pleasure.
Guest today has been Robert Graham, who is the chairman of the Republican Party in Arizona. I hope you've enjoyed and gained insights from our presentation. We're here every week on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Kili'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute. Until next time, let's work together. E hana ka ko.